Hello, my fellow webheads. It's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco, and I am here with you today to review another issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Today we're looking at issue number 49. If you were here for last week's episode, then you would have realized that we ended on a cliffhanger with Spidey seemingly defeated by the hands of the new Vulture. So if you didn't see last week's episode, please consider going here to the channel, subscribing to the channel, and going to the playlist that I have of all these videos. We have been looking at every issue of The Amazing Spider-Man going all the way back to Amazing Fantasy number 15, the very first appearance of Spider-Man. So there's a lot of content there for you to check out if you're new to the channel. If you're a regular follower, thank you, and I look forward to keep going on this journey with you. We are just over 1 year of Amazing Spider-Man videos, and it kind of snuck up on me. So I don't have the exact date. I'd have to go back and look at the exact date that the first video was posted, but we did hit number 52 last week in terms of episodes. So you figure one a week, give or take, with some breaks for holidays and things like that. And we are essentially at 1 year's worth of videos. So again, thank you to everybody that made this happen, for following along and being part of this journey. I'll mention this at the end as well, but I did want to comment on a video that I posted the other day talking about my goal for 2026 in 1,000 subscribers. That is a huge milestone, and I think we can get there together. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, I will be giving away this original 11 by 17 full color, one-of-a-kind Spider-Man illustration by yours truly to one random subscriber. Everything, it is free. All you have to do is click the subscribe button and follow along so that you can be part of the live stream video when we choose the lucky winner. So I'll follow up at the end with that as well. But again, let's dive into The Amazing Spider-Man number 49. Okay, here we have the cover. This is a pretty cool cover. I mentioned it a little bit in the last video with a different kind of scene. There was a scene with 3 characters that were talking. And I mentioned that having 3 characters interacting in one image can be kind of tough without having one of them facing away from the viewer, away from the camera as it would be, and just showing their back. So this is a really nice way of integrating 3 characters, 3 figures into the image. As always, because the characters are the designs are so excellent, the colors are bright and really pop and stand out, especially against the background. So they've picked a very nice blue gradient that goes from dark to light, which works great, and the darker tree shapes help frame the whole thing. So overall, this is a really nice cover, and for me, most importantly, there's not a lot of copy on it. So copy, again, is these word balloons, and sometimes, especially in some of the older issues, we would see lots and lots of, these blurbs, the best comic you've ever read, what will happen to Spidey, can the villains, and it would take up most of the space in the imagery. Here, it's pretty minimal, which is terrific. I like that. Overall, really a good cover. The kind of thing that, again, if you're picking it up at the store, off a newsstand, wherever you're buying this comic, whether you knew what happened in the issue before or not, you're probably going to want to at least open it up and go, what happens? Because the cover doesn't give it away. And that's important. We've seen some of those too, where the cover kind of gives away if, what is Spidey going to get out of this? And if there's no credible threat to your hero, then there's no tension in your story, and your readers are less likely to be urged to pick it up. So just a storytelling tip, right? Make sure that your characters or your heroes are in peril, and that leads to viewership. Let me go over all the basics, of course. This is a scanned PDF copy. Marvel in 2004 scanned every issue that they had of, or I guess just every issue up to 2004 of The Amazing Spider-Man. So we're seeing something that was put on a flatbed scanner. This is a real comic, not a digital reprint. There's no recoloring. You'll see all the old ads. You'll see wear and tear on the paper. You'll see printing errors. I'll point out a little bit of that at some point. And so, yeah, it's all the real deal. This was the published date of this was June of 1967. But you can see, and again, if you saw the previous episode, this takes place during a blizzard in New York City. So there is some confusion there. I've always been a little confused by it, but the idea is that the dates on the comics, I don't think it says, oh yeah, so it says June here on the cover. It's not sold in, well, hang on. I mean, I believe this is right. It's maybe sold in June, but produced 3 months earlier. So it would have been done in late February or March, which is, kind of the end of winter, and you can certainly have up in parts of the northern part of the country, you have blizzards and snowfall during February for sure, early March for sure. So makes sense, but it's a little confusing situation. It just has to do with making sure that it has to do with how comics are sold, and they're made in advance, and then the numbers sold and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of that. There's plenty of details you can find online if you want to find out about that for sure. But just in case you're confused why something marked June is a story about snow, because this story would have been actually written and drawn as much as 3 months before it was actually sold in the stores. Good splash page, kicks right off from where we ended the previous story. We've got Gwen has got the headband back, but still a little bit of the Mary Jane bangs, which is a little bit different. So we're starting to see a little development into the Gwen Stacy look, more kind of what we end up seeing regularly. So there's a lot of interesting stuff, very quickly but very subtly going on with the Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, Peter kind of thing going on. We'll see some of that. We've got the new Vulture. We've got Kraven. Great stuff here. I do want to point out, in case, again, you're new and you hadn't seen previous episodes, Stan Lee, the classic Stan Lee, is still writing the issues. John Romita is the artist, and here he's listed as the only artist, which normally would mean he did the pencils, so he drew everything in pencil, and then he inked the final black lines of the artwork. They did not at that time give credit to colorists. It was done by a group of people. Much later, as we go through forward and with this series, eventually we'll start to see credits for colorists as well, but we're not at that point yet. Now, I was told by friend of the channel, friend of mine, and comic historian Nick Caputo that this issue was inked by Mike Espisito, and just not credited. So that happens sometimes, and sort of for a number of reasons. Today, I think a lot of us think of comic books as, hopefully, as fine art, made by artists who are looking to make statements the same way an artist would paint a picture or sculpt a sculpture or whatever they do. I think in this time, yes, these artists were definitely artists, but they were also just sort of craftsmen or craftspeople. And it was a job. It was a 9-to-5 job. People like Jack Kirby have famously said that was sort of his plan, as he got up a certain time every day and he worked until a certain time every day, and then he put his pencil down, and that was his day. And so he clocked in, clocked out, and got as much done as he could during that time. So it was just kind of considered a gig. So you kind of did things. If something didn't work out great, you moved on. If the pencil wasn't quite right, if that hand wasn't quite perfect, you didn't spend 2 weeks trying to fix it. You just kind of drew it and moved on. So when you have a guest inker or a ghost inker, somebody who's not credited, or a ghost artist of some kind, these things happen where all of a sudden maybe, John Romita is in a bind. He's busy. He's not feeling well. He needs to take a couple days off. And so he's got enough time to do the pencils, but not also ink. And so they just kind of look around what they used to call the bullpen. Or which sometimes was a group of people in the office at Marvel. Sometimes they would talk to, another freelance artist and go, hey, Mike, if you can do it, I got an ink job for you. And Mike needs a little extra money. He goes, okay, no problem. And there you go. Last minute, it gets inked. These are the stories, behind the scenes stories that happen. And I've heard some of these stories all the way into the 90s. I'll give you a very good example if you want to check it out. Rob Liefeld, creator of Deadpool, one of the co-founders of Image Comics, has a very, very good comics podcast called Robservations, featuring Rob Liefeld. You can see it on YouTube, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. He recently just did an interview with Whilce Portacio, one of the other co-founders of Image, creator of characters like Bishop and the X-Men. And they have a great story about the time when an issue of the X-Men needed to be done. And Whilce, Jim Lee, and Scott Williams, 3 artists famous for working on that title and many, many other awesome titles. The 3 of them jammed, all working together to get a complete issue of the Uncanny X-Men drawn and inked. And I think he said it was like 9 days. So one guy would sort of lay it out. One guy would do the backgrounds. One guy would do the figures. And they're all just sort of passing things around. And sometimes that's how you had to get a job done. And so there's a lot of cool stories about that. Check it out. If you're a comic fan like me and you love the behind the scenes stuff, really cool stuff there. So back to the issue. Sorry about the sidestep there. As I went through this, I did kind of think about it from an inking standpoint. And in my notes, I don't have anything to say. It's a decent job. There's a few things here and there where I'll point it out where I think things are a little, there's some mistakes. Not mistakes, but I'll point it out. And that might be chalked up to Mike Espisito as the inker, who was not a regular Spider-Man artist really by this point. John Romita had been inking for a while. Some of the inks are maybe a little less detailed. Maybe there's a little less I'll get to it, but in this arm over here in Kraven, John might have done a little more feathering on some of the musculature, or maybe some more drop shadows to show that it's being lit from the front in this TV screen. But otherwise, it's a fairly solid inking job, I thought. Now, one of the mistakes that I point out here is with Spider-Man. So I've mentioned this. So when you look at and compare a Steve Ditko Spider-Man face to John Romita's Spider-Man face, John Romita's Spider-Man face is is thicker. Steve Ditko's Spider-Man had more of a pointed chin. And then the web design. So with Steve, it would vary sometimes from panel to panel. Sometimes the pattern, the circular pattern, there might be 4 rings, there might be 6 rings. So one of the things that John Romita did is he came in and he simplified it, made fewer radiating lines, fewer rings, and kept it consistent. Now, on one hand, it makes it more pop art. It's definitely easier to reproduce on lunchboxes and t-shirts and toys and stuff for kids, no problem. On the other hand, it's not quite as creepy. It's not kind of as spidery or as webby, as I think what Steve was going for. That's all. I think that was always his feeling, was Spider-Man was supposed to have an air of creepiness to him. that as John, by the time we get here, he's almost baby blue and this very clear pattern. And the pattern is just like this. So I'm going to zoom in on the faces here and just point it out. And there's a couple of times in this issue where it isn't right. So typically what you see is there's 3 lines radiating between his eyes on the top of his head. There's 2 lines down the center of the face. 1 comes from the corner of each eyes, and then 2 on the side of the eyes. And then you have so you have the little tiny center ring in the middle. Then you have 1 here, 2, and then this should connect up here, and then a 3rd one at the top of the forehead, and you don't see the 3rd one because it would be under the chin. But here you can see where it's a little wrong. So the radiating lines are right. The center little web spot is right. You've got 1 line, 2 lines, but unless he's looking up, really, we shouldn't probably see this 3rd line, meaning that all this web stuff should have been pushed out slightly further, and it should have had less circular pattern on it. So there's a few times where we see this 3rd line kind of come in and out. So here it's not there, and then in the next panel there's more webs than there should be. So that, again, I would personally chalk that up to possibly the inker, considering that John Romita is the one that simplified this pattern, and I would assume that his pencils would have kept to the pattern. But anyway, it doesn't take away from the story. It's just something that me, detail, obsessive, as I'm going through these issues, looking for things to talk about with you all. That's one of the things I noticed. I do like on both of these panels where the camera is moving in and out, meaning you have, again, you think of the viewer's eyes as a camera, and as opposed to the images getting closer or further away from us, we are moving closer or further away to create those camera angles. So here, you might be 4 or 5 feet away from Spidey. Now you push in just a little bit closer. Now you're 3 feet away from Spidey as he rises. And now we're a foot away from Spidey getting a close-up. Then we back out another 3 or 4 feet, and we keep backing out until we have this long shot of him walking home. So story-wise, in the previous issue, one of the reasons that Spidey had been defeated was because he was ill. He's suffering from the flu, and the Vulture got the best of him. So the cold weather kind of helps, I guess, knock down his fever long enough for him to wake up, get home, and get into bed where he can rest. But good camera movement, that's very important. It's something that if you pay attention and you watch, when you watch television, when you watch movies, you'll see that same kind of in and out variation of the camera to change the view of the reader, or change the distance of the viewer to what you're looking at, to emphasize different things and just to keep things interesting and moving. If everything is filmed or drawn or whatever medium you're looking at is at the exact same distance at all time, it's like watching a play on stage. The viewer, I never get closer, I never get further away from that stage. So everything is very static. Here we can move it around and it becomes more dynamic views. I mentioned the arm earlier in terms of the inking. This is a really nice framing mechanism to have this arm in the foreground as we introduce Kraven, and he is angry at the Vulture because the Vulture is now being considered to be the guy who defeated Spider-Man. I did think it was kind of funny that Kraven has a television and yet decides to just frame it in bamboo. So I thought that was kind of funny, kind of an interesting concept there. Just kind of made me chuckle. This is a really nice page here. Did a good job with the setting, so we know where Kraven is. So you've got the animals, you've got the drums, he's breaking this big vase, and then I love this silhouette of him coming down into this sort of like training pit he has, where he has a tiger, and he fights the tiger to keep his fighting skills at peak level, I guess. And I thought the silhouette of him coming down into this room was excellent. Also, the tiger, it's a pretty good tiger. Again, today we would just use a Google search and you can find all kinds of photos on tigers. Back here in the 60s, if you want photos of tigers, you'd have to find a magazine, probably pretty grainy photos. They're not going to be quite the high fidelity type imagery that we see today. But still pretty good tiger in terms of the stripes, the body shape, stuff like that. It works. The only thing I did not like here is this shadow over the legs. So you understand that there's shadow on the ground. The light is coming from Kraven, behind Kraven. That's why he's silhouetted. So the light would be shining through the bars, casting a shadow onto the tiger. It works here on this paw, but on these legs, that's not how it would work. The shadow would wrap around the form of the tiger. It wouldn't be just a straight line coming over the top. So I didn't like this. I thought it was kind of weird. Honestly, there's a part of me that makes me wonder if it almost looks like an inking error. Like he inked the bar through the line or through the tiger's leg, right? With the outline, with the contour line, because you can see this sort of cross line right here. And then went, whoops. And I don't want to go and I don't want to have to redo it. I don't want to try to white it out. What do? Oh, I'll turn it into a shadow. If honestly, that's looking closer at it, that's my guess as to what may have happened. Either way, it doesn't work as a shadow because it doesn't follow the form. Your shadows should follow the form of the thing that they are on top of, right? But otherwise, very, very nice stuff. Good action, pretty good. Same thing here. This is really nice action of him just kind of beating up the tiger and then going, back to your cage. Calls him Raja, of course. So there you go. Go ahead and get back to your cage. I've got 2 seconds. I've got enough of a workout. Little too much of. I still haven't come up with a term for this stuff. It's not an explosion because it's just where the two of them are meeting, but it's this like action explosion lines. Little too much of it for my taste. Sometimes I feel like it's being used as a crutch so that John or whoever the artist or inker or whoever is doesn't have to do a lot of background work. Yes, the two striking create energy, and certainly Jack Kirby was somebody that would have, pioneered stuff like this. And there's times for it and there's not times for it. Here's a little inking error that didn't get cleaned up. You can see over the top, the lines came out over the panel a couple places. Again, like I said, this is a job. We've got X number of days to get this done. Sometimes mistakes get made. Nobody sees it. And you just sort of let's just move it on. It's fine. We'll move on to the next month. But you can see some of that stuff here and there. And then, so anyway, little too much of the explodey line work. There aren't actual explosions, right? There isn't a flash of light and force when you throw the tiger against the wall, right? There's not a shock wave or something like that. So it's a little much. And then I thought Kraven's face here felt flat. I don't know what it is. I couldn't, in my notes, I can't put my finger on it exactly. Maybe it's just the way that it's shaded. But it feels very, very flat. I don't feel like the nose is coming out towards us. It all feels very much one plane. And, so maybe what we really needed was some shading, some hatching or something around the eyes to set them back further or something. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't have an answer why exactly, just that for me it felt very, very flat. And then the last thing I want to just point out over here on this page, in 1967, you could buy a submarine that was over 7 feet long that 2 children could sit in that fired rockets and torpedoes for $7. and you got it for free for 10 days. This is, I mean, it's crazy. I think I've pointed this ad out before in other episodes. Oh my gosh. It's sturdily constructed of 200-pound test fiberboard. Comes complete with easy assembly instructions. Costs only $6.98 for this giant of fun, adventure, and science. Wow. Oh, but you have to pay 75 cents for shipping because it's so big. 75 cents for a submarine that you can apparently put together, put in your backyard. Your kids get in it, push a button, and it launches rockets and torpedoes. Wow. For $7. Okay. So Kraven takes off. He is going to go after the Vulture and prove that, of course, he is the true hunter, the true alpha. This panel here of Kraven running up the building, I don't like it, and I'll tell you why. It's fine, the perspective. You got this perspective here. Whatever this is down below, there's like a circle. I think this is supposed to be the tops of buildings, but it's so small, and then this blue, and then whatever. So if this is the ground, I mean, is it? I guess, because if he's not running down a building. If he was, in theory, the lion mane of his costume would be flowing forward, or he would just be falling. So I'm assuming he's running up a building, but there's no ground. And then what is this? So this is a wall of the building. So was he on the ground floor almost? But then what is this shape here? If you're going to do this sort of scene, and we've seen this done with Spidey climbing up buildings, down buildings, etc., you have to establish a clear ground beneath them. Otherwise, it just becomes very disturbing and very confusing to your mind. It's almost like an optical illusion of, well, what is happening? What direction is he going? If I tell you he's climbing down a building and you look at this, okay, the blue could be the sky. That could be the top of the building. This is an upper story, and I don't know what, it's something hanging off the roof. It's just as viable as him climbing up a building. So you have to establish what this is. If it's sky, give me a cloud, give me a bird. If it's a ground, give me a distinct sidewalk, a road, cars, people, something that I can clearly tell that that's the ground. And in this case, they did neither. So I do not care for that particular panel. Let's see here. Oh, this is a really nice pose of the Vulture. I like the nice horizontal panel to give us, as I've mentioned in the previous episode, room for him to spread his wings. When you have a character, you know, if you just show the Vulture, just his body, and you don't show those wings spread out, it really loses the impact of the character. Again, we do have another error. In this case, we have a coloring error. So the Vulture does not wear gloves, and that's established right here and in the rest of the book. The costume comes to his wrist, and his hands are the same color as his face. You can even see here it was drawn with nails. He has thumbnails. And so, but they're colored green. So where's the error? There's two errors here, and I don't know exactly where to throw the blame. It could be on the colorist. So clearly they just went and colored the whole thing green and then went, whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Corrected themselves in other panels and just moved on. Now, why would they color it green? There is no line here depicting the cuff of the sleeve to delineate between costume and skin. So, is that an inking error? Did Mike Espisito not ink this cuff here? Did John not draw it in? Even if John didn't draw it in, I would think it should be here. So anyway, that's a coloring error that got missed. And again, it's a team effort. And possibly on a short deadline, hence the reason we've got a guest inker, stuff like that. So mistakes happen and we move on. It's a nice cityscape though. I thought that was very well done. I like the lighter ink lines as we move back, less detail, just little dashes for windows and stuff. It's a real easy, nice, simple way to do a cityscape when you've got a main figure. We shouldn't be spending all our time having to focus on these buildings. They're not important. I should be drawn to the Vulture, which it is. So the Vulture is going to attack this helicopter. He believes, obviously, Spider-Man is out of the picture, he thinks, permanently. Nobody can touch him. So he attacks this helicopter, which apparently has a person in it with a bag full of diamonds. How does the Vulture know that there's somebody with diamonds in this helicopter? Why? So was it on the news? Was it in the newspaper? Why would you advertise such a thing? You're just begging for trouble. I missed that part. Apparently he's clairvoyant or something. I don't know. So there's, again, it's comics. We're suspending our disbelief to believe that there's a man in a suit flying around looking like a vulture. I get it. So for me, the plot point is, how does he know? How does he know that there's diamonds in this helicopter? And it doesn't... I'm missing that. And again, when it happened, I stopped and I went, as I'm reading this, and I went, how does this guy know about this? That doesn't make sense to me. Here's another thing. The scale is strange. So the Vulture's swooping in and kicking the helicopter, or hitting it or something. This is, again, why I don't necessarily always like this striking, this energy, whatever. It's drawn at the Vulture's feet like he has, and you see this motion line, so he's swooped in, and it looks like his feet are striking the helicopter. If that's the case, he is far too large, and this helicopter is far too small. If this is the scale, and his feet are hitting it, it doesn't make sense. Now, if he's swooping by, striking it, and moving on, then I need more distance between the two to keep them in relative scale with each other. So that's something that's important that you have to think about. And this idea where, for whatever reason, John Romita likes to draw this energy blast anytime anything strikes anything else, causes me to go, well, that's the point of impact, and his feet are right there. He didn't hit this 2 seconds ago and swing by. The Vulture either needs to be bigger to the right and more in the foreground, or the helicopter needs to be smaller and there needs to be distance between them. Otherwise, it just looks like he's a giant guy and this is a very small helicopter that he couldn't even fit inside of. So, scale. Scale is important, and that one got it wrong. So he gets the diamonds, and everything's cool. He takes off. The Kraven is on the hunt, so he's going to capture and fight like I said, the Vulture. Everybody in the world is looking for Peter or coming to visit Peter. So Aunt May, Mrs. Watson are there to see how Peter's feeling. Then Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy show up. And everybody wants to see Peter. Everybody wants to know how he is. And Harry, smartly, Harry actually really good dude is like, hey, listen, you guys, he needs to rest. He's feeling like garbage. He's been sick. It's too much. Let's get out of here. So he takes the girls and they leave. So at least the older ladies, Aunt May's not going to leave. But at least they're going to be quiet and give Peter a chance to rest. So good on Harry. I did want to point this out as well. I don't know what is going on, but Mary Jane, just her characterization is getting cartoonish. What I mean is she cannot function like a normal human being if there is music, right? So they know Peter is sick. They know Peter is running a fever. Peter's been in bed. Poor Peter. They show up and they're like, And Gwen is immediately like, "Oh, if he's sleeping, we should leave." And then Mary Jane is like, "Hey, I'm going to play some music and dance cuz that's all I do every time I show up." And then and Harry's like, "Hey, come on. The guy's sick, he's sleeping. Don't be blasting music." And all that Mary Jane can think about is, "Oh no. You got to the worst thing possible, you're going to shut off all this groovy music." Like, so thin, so one-dimensional, so cartoonish. And I guess maybe that's the idea is, yes, she's pretty and she's vivacious and she's outgoing, but maybe that shallowness is what they're playing up to push Peter towards Gwen. I don't know. But, so Peter, he's in the other room. He's not sleeping. He knows what's going on, but he's starting to feel a little better, which is good. But he's got to wait for everybody to leave. Cut back to the city, and Kraven is hunting the Vulture. This is nice. So we're starting to get into some action, some real good action, and we're going to see big panels, which I always like big panels for big action. So this is pretty good. I said this is a really good twist of the figure here. So he's used a line, he's roped the Vulture's ankle, and then twisted to pull the Vulture down to him. So what I wanted to do here is I'm going to show you an image that comes from, actually, do I have it here? I do, but I don't want to mess up my setup. I'm using it. Hang on. I'll show you. Hang on. I want to tip over my microphone. So I have this book right here. I'm going to just real quick cut back to me. This is called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And I did a video going through some of the key points of this book for anybody who's not read it, and things that are really, really important, really critical for any new artist to read and learn and take into consideration as you're making your art. So I'm going to put in an image here of of one of the things I'm talking about. So as you can see, this is a description that they have in the book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, that talks about tension and drama in motion, and how it's the extreme end of the motion is where the energy is. And so this is something that sticks with me. I think about it whenever I'm drawing a character that is punching or swinging or jumping or whatever. You want that extreme end of this scale of motion. So this is just a terrific example, and now I'm going to cut back to the comic. So back here to this panel where we see Kraven really twisting with maximum effort to pull the Vulture down. So you see that twist, which goes along with the image we just looked at from the book. Vulture punches him and then swoops out of his grasp. Now, this is where, again, scale does not work for me. It's hard to do in this because you can't see what I did. But so I used, and you could do this yourself if you've got, if you're not watching on a phone, maybe if you're watching on a computer or something like that, put something in scale. So I used a pen cap. So I took a pen cap, and my, ballpoint pen cap is the size of, from the shoulders of the Vulture, from the base of his neck, goes to his waist. So I know that my pen cap that I have here, my pen cap, as I'm looking at it, I hold it up to the screen, that's that size. So that means that for Kraven, basically should be roughly the same, right? From the base of his neck to the base of his spine should be the length of my pen cap. But when I hold it up to the screen again and measure there, it only comes down maybe halfway to his stomach. So one of these figures is too big, and it's just something that it's not, it can be maintained. You can keep scale. You just have to be cognizant of it. So again, that's a problem I have there. But overall, I like the action. I like the dark shading of under the wings of the Vulture's face, underneath Kraven's leg here. I think the shading is very, very nice. Tells us there's a bright sunshine light source, so you're going to also have really dark shadows. I think that's really good. Same thing up here on this page, the next page with the dark under the wing. I think that was done very well. And we've established this skylight that because of the extra weight and the way Kraven is pulling his strength, he pulls the two figures both through the skylight. So I think that's really, really good. Peter is feeling all better. And he decides, even though Aunt May and Mrs. Watson are there waiting for him, he's got to sneak out as Spidey and take out these two villains because they're both too dangerous to be left alone. So we have a nice Spidey entry here where he's hanging down as the two figures are fighting. Again, hard to have three figures all sort of visible to this direction to us, but then also see each other. So I think this was done well. I did question, though, for me, this is just my own thought. If I was going to draw this, what's the emphasis? And I thought, before you turn the page, you'll see because it's there. I thought as the Spidey entry, I might do the same exact situation, the same exact composition, but I would put the camera, just like his little cameras here in the background, I would put the reader over Spidey's shoulder. So we would see a big close-up of his head and shoulder with the webs as he's coming down, and then see Kraven and the Vulture fighting and turning and looking up and seeing him. That's how I would have done it. So that's what I wrote in my notes. I was like, oh yeah, maybe the camera would be better over Spidey's shoulders. That's just a choice. There's no wrong answer. This is perfectly fine the way it is here as his entry. I just thought the focus might be a little bit more on Spidey entering the scene versus the focus being on the main characters of the two fighting. Well, look at what we have right here on the next page. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Spidey entering the scene, hanging by his webs. I might have put the camera a little closer to make him larger in the corner, sort of as a framing reference, and then the figure's larger, especially because we have a bigger panel to do it in down here. But it's basically the same idea. That's what I would have done. So we see it here. But it's Spidey. Oh, Spidey's face webbing is off. Yes, in panel 3. Again, you can see it's the wrong number of rings on the bottom of Spidey's face. It should be 1, 2, and they've added a third, which makes his face a little longer than it should be. You can see it's right up here. It's 1, 2, and then you have the bottom of the chin. So it's correct on this page. It's incorrect in this page. It makes the face look very long. But this I thought was a nice action reaction. What I mean is the action is Kraven pushing the Vulture out of the way because he's going to destroy Spidey. And then the reaction of the figure of the Vulture is very, very nice. So overall, good action. Spidey bouncing away is very nice. This pose is pretty cool with his hands bouncing off his hands. And again, the pattern is right. Great horizontal Kraven leaping. Again, I would have, to keep it consistent, I would have liked to have flipped this panel. So if he's on the right side of the page, he leaps from right to left. And then as Spidey swings him over with his feet, he's just using his own momentum to flip him over. He's not kicking him, he's flipping him, and that makes sense. With this being the wrong way, he's jumping from the right, coming from the left, and then being flipped back to the left. This panel in the middle needs to be reversed. One of these days, I'll do that. I'll try to find it if I could do that. If I could just take in Photoshop, if I could do like a screen capture, Photoshop, and just flip this one panel horizontally and see how it would look. But otherwise, it's a good page. It's just, again, the momentum and the stuff is the angle or the direction of Kraven is not right. Same thing here. Good action. Notice, so when John Romita is really cooking, his page composition, he leaves a lot of big open space. He varies up your panels. Some are vertical, some are horizontal. This is, sometimes it's a big square splash and then a couple horizontal breaks, stuff like that. Good panels. We've seen a few of these 4-panel grids falling in, and again, I don't know if maybe it's just faster. It takes more time to come up with interesting and different compositions. If I want to just divide the panel in 4, if I'm just doing it real rough and someone's going to ink, I just go like this, and then here's panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4. So I don't know if that's what's happening, maybe, but we're seeing more of these kinds of panels than I think we would normally see in a John Romita book. But good stuff. Spidey's healthy. He's, got himself together. He knows how to fight the Vulture better than the Vulture knows how to fight him, because the Vulture, this is a new guy, so flipping him by his wings, it's pretty good. And then Kraven grabs him in a hold, which I did have a question here. Just Stan, what is a bull gorilla? I've heard of silverback gorillas. I've heard of male gorillas. I don't know if I've ever heard the term bull gorilla. If you've ever heard of bull gorilla, if that's a real thing, let me know in the comments. But I did want to point this out. Here, the mask is right. Okay, but Jerry, you said it goes 1 ring, 2 rings, and we don't see the 3rd one on the bottom of the chin. Aha! But you notice his eyes are up further, so his head is being tipped back. So yes, we are going to see more of his chin, less of less of up above. So that's why we see much more or much less webbing around the top of his head than we do around the bottom. So in this case, yes, this is right. This makes sense. So that's when you use different web patterns, is when his head is tilted one way or the other. Okay. Vulture gets a quick lick in, but Spidey's too tough. Nice elbow there. I think this is nice. This from panel to panel here, I think works, right? Because he elbows with his left and then spins around with his right arm. So the choreography of this, to me, makes a lot of sense. I don't have any problem there. I also said the camera cuts work. So what I mean by that, again, is if you're, imagine this is a moving imagery, television movie, etc. The Vulture swoops by and punches. Then the camera cuts to a different, closer angle of Spidey elbowing Kraven in the stomach, and then cuts again. It'd be, like I said, it'd be a cut of a film image. Spins, punches. Now we cut again to a wider shot to show the Vulture swooping in again. And then we cut to a closer shot of Kraven firing his muscle stunning ray from his costume. So great camera work. Again, this would work as storyboards for a television or movie. Makes a lot of sense to me. There's some things in between you'd have to fill in, but camera cuts in terms of cinematography, very, very nice. Works great. Nice wide shot here. So, Spidey gets the leap on them, and the Vulture takes the brunt. Now, this is where I was saying there are a lot of coloring errors. I mentioned things like, here's another green Vulture hand. But here, the registration is way off. So what I mean by registration. So we talked about it previously, about the printing process and how the color works. So every color, there's 4 colors that are used back then in printing a comic book page. And it's just a matter of what percentage of what color is printed next to each other in little dots to make that color. So, for example, anything that's green is a mixture of cyan and yellow, and it's just a matter of what the percentage is. The green on the Vulture is going to be a little more cyan. The green on this ground that's more yellowish green is going to be more yellow. So there's more yellow dots than cyan dots. And here there's probably more of a 50-50 mix. So the paper has to be printed on multiple times. And then what happened here clearly is you can see the red on Spidey's on Spidey's feet. Then on the next one, his eyes. So the registration was off, meaning when they went through and they went to print the combination of the magenta and yellow, which makes this red on Spidey, it didn't line up. The paper was off a little bit. And so the red, instead of being printed up here, which would butt up against the black line, that's the fourth color is black, instead it's down lower. And so now you see this yellow, so everything is off. Now you've got colors down here. Same thing. This is why the blue of Spidey is so dark in this, because it's actually covered up with red to make a purple, because it should be up, be shifting the whole layer up higher. I mean, you can see how far off this finger is. So the registration, the printing registration, it's not so much a coloring error as it is a printing error. And that registration is off. So I apologize. It's not a coloring error. It's an error in the color, but it's not by the colorist. It's, again, a printing error. And then as a publisher, you have to decide, am I going to print this, or am I going to destroy either these pages or this book and get them reprinted? Again, you don't have time. So these came out on the market. This was something that was sold. Somebody bought this issue, and everybody kind of went, it is what it is, and just move on. So, but that's where, when you see these weird colors, like why all of a sudden is this area over here purple, is some sort of a printing error where the red and the blue both got printed probably equally on this area. So who knows? But this, where you see these sort of ghost imagery or stuff like that, that is a registration error in the printing process. Okay, so the Vulture's taken out by the Ray. Spidey is now going to go mano-a-mano with Kraven, who thinks he's got him. And Spidey just, as Kraven charges, Spidey gives him one big full punch right to the solar plexus. So I put here, bad bull punch. So if you are, excuse me, a Gen X kid like me, sorry, I got a tickle. If you are a Gen X kid like me, you remember Nintendo, and when Nintendo Entertainment System, the original, came out, we all wanted Punch-Out. It was the coolest game. Punch-Out is awesome. And one of the characters that you have to defeat is called Bald Bull, and he's a big guy, and if you make him mad enough, he charges right at you, and one solid punch to the gut puts him down. And this is the exact same thing, and it's exactly what came to mind. So if you are like me, if you're too young to know Nintendo Punch-Out Bald Bull, check it on YouTube. You'll see plenty of little clips and videos of how you defeat Bald Bull with the exact move that Spidey just pulled right here. So that was fun. I thought that was really cool. All right, so he's got all his photos. He's got the guys webbed up. He's going to let the authorities know where they are. Heads home, sneaks back into bed before anybody arrives. The doctor gives him Peter a clean bill of health, and everything is good to go. Now, but we see next, Spider-Man no more. So everything ends on a nice note, but there is some tension here. What's going to happen next week? So that is the book. We'll cut back over to the desk and wrap things up. So that was Amazing Spider-Man number 49. Fun. There were some issues. Again, sometimes, you could chalk it up to speed. You could chalk it up to deadlines. You could chalk it up to who knows. There were some errors. There were some things I didn't care for in terms of just, there were some problems with scale. There were some coloring errors. There was the printing errors. Just some stuff that didn't work for me. So overall, in terms of just a rating, I really like the previous issue. I think this one hit a little flat. Again, some of it is Spidey never really felt like he was in super danger, right? He was healthy. He jumped in. He was kind of never really um, threatened through the whole fight between the Vulture and Kraven. So the drama wasn't there as much. So I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. I didn't like it as much as the previous issue, but it was still good. I like the wrap up of the 2-part storyline. I think it's interesting. I liked what's going on with Peter getting over the flu and all the secondary characters, all of his friends and family and everybody coming to look for him. So it's interesting. We're seeing Peter originally in these first few issues super loner, right? It's like him, Aunt May. It's kind of it. And now, May, and then eventually Betty from the Bugle. But now we're seeing more and more people. His circle is expanding. Peter is becoming maybe a little more well-rounded as a person. So it's a little nice to see that kind of development for a character that we love. So anyway, that's The Amazing Spider-Man number 49. Thank you so much for joining me today on this journey as we look through this. We will be looking at Amazing Spider-Man number 50, a very big issue, a famous issue, something that if you're a Spider-Man fan, I guarantee at some point you've seen this cover and kind of an idea of this story. So that's a big one coming up. Episodes do go out every Monday at 8 a.m. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you click those notifications. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like as well. The likes help. So please think about that. And again, don't forget, when we hit 1,000 subscribers, a lucky subscriber will be getting this for free. An original 11x17 Spider-Man illustration by yours truly. No purchase necessary. Shipping is free to you. So all you have to do is click that subscribe button and think about maybe turning on a friend, a neighbor, a family member. Maybe they want to subscribe as well. It costs you nothing to do it. Just click that button, and when we hit 1,000, you may be the lucky winner. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week with even more Spider-Man.